This is the JT Mini by Behringer, originally called Saturn Soul when it was announced in 2022. It is a 3-voice analog synthesizer with a built-in sequencer and a 27-note touch keyboard in a portable form factor. It has no display, and while it doesn't have any menus, there are some configurations that can be done on the touch keyboard. It does not run on batteries, but you can easily hook it up to a power bank using USB-C. Two things before I start. I bought the JT Mini for full price from Thomann. I have no connection with Behringer in any way. My only relationship with Behringer is that I own a couple of their synths and drum machines. Although I will make a fair and unbalanced review, keep in mind that I work as a sound designer, and my opinions will most likely be biased towards what I think of its sound and its sound-shaping capabilities. Let's begin with an overview of what exactly this is. The general consensus is that this is based on the Roland Jupiter 8, but Behringer actually don't specify which Jupiter the JT Mini is based on. Apart from the modern variations, you have 3 main Jupiters, 4, 6 and 8, and all of them, while similar, are seen as separate instruments in their own right, and have their respective fans. I assume they mean Jupiter 8, not just because it's the superstar of the Jupiter family, but also that Behringer have pictures of it in their promo material. So, what happens when you shrink down a 22 kilo, roughly 50 pounds, heavyweight to less than half a kilo? The JT Mini is a true analog synthesizer with 3 voices, not 8 as with the original. You also only get 1 oscillator section. The original had 2. Sadly, what that means in practice is that there is no oscillator sync or cross-modulation, which is one of my favorite things I use with the Jupiters. Here is an example of what the cross-modulation can do using the Jupiter oscillator in UHI Diva. The oscillator is not capable of making noise, which might not seem to be a big thing, but noise is great for making effects, drums and percussion. Continuing on the list of missing things is the separate high-pass filter, but just like the original, it has a low-pass filter capable of both 12 and 24 dB per octave. There are no effects, but the original didn't have any either. What the JT Mini has that the original didn't is a simple step sequencer, capable of recording knob movements. The JT Mini is paraphonic, which means that although it has 3 independent voices, those 3 voices share the same voice architecture. For example, if you play 3 notes at the same time with a long release, you will hear 3 notes slowly fading out. But if you play the same notes after each other, the sound restarts and doesn't let the release of the previous note play out. In other words, you cannot make long sounds slowly blending into each other, like with pads, for example. All 3 voices can be combined into one monophonic unison voice, and there is a dedicated knob for setting the detune. The Unison sounds great, and the range of the D-tune goes from phasey to absolute horror. It is especially when using the D-tune when you really feel that you're working with an analog synthesizer. This thing has power. Let's move on to the oscillator, which is a copy of the VCO1 on the Jupiter 8 and contains triangle, sawtooth, PWM and square. The waveforms sound as they should, and the PWM is modulated by the LFO. Putting the JT Mini in unison mode and with a bit of pulse width modulation is a recipe for really fat results. There is an octave knob that lets you set the range through 6 octaves. The lowest position gives a really nice bass, and with the highest position and the highest note, things start to fall apart in a quite interesting way. When I saw the first promo images of the JT Mini, I noticed the filter knob was marked with both low and high, which made me think the knob was a combined low-pass high-pass filter, but it is not. Unlike the original, the filter in the JT Mini is low-pass only. The filter is very well behaved. It's tuxedo and wine, rather than moonshine and hot dogs. You lose a bit of the low frequencies when turning up the resonance, but it doesn't kill the bass entirely. The whole filter feels very well balanced. It's easy to create nice, punchy kick drums with it, as well as funky basses. Just like the original, the filter can be switched between 12 and 24 dB per octave, and you do this by holding the function button and pressing on the touch keyboard. The filter can be modulated by the envelope and the LFO, so let's look at those two now. There is only one LFO and one envelope, and just like old analog gear with limited number of modulators, they can do more than one job at a time. The envelope works both for the amplifier and the filter, and the LFO can modulate the filter, pitch and create pulse width modulation on the oscillator. The shape of the LFO can be set using the touch keyboard by holding the function button and selecting one of the four shapes: scene, saw, square and random. I really like that some of the functionality of the synth can be accessed using the touch keyboard. It's clear and much easier than going into a menu. There are two knobs for the LFO, speed and delay. Speed sets the rate of the LFO and delay adds some time before the LFO begins. While it is limiting with only one LFO and one envelope, I never felt that to be a huge problem when making sounds. With a limited number of modulators, you have to make a choice of where the modulator will make most impact. So it teaches you to put your priorities right. One more thing before we move on to the arpeggiator. As you might have noticed, there is no way to manually set the oscillator PWM. You can either modulate it or not, but you cannot, as on the original, manually adjust the pulse width. But you sort of can do it in a roundabout way. If you set the oscillator to PWM and the LFO to its slowest rate and turn up the LFO delay to max, you can get some control over the PWM using the PWM mod knob. Using the arpeggiator is very straightforward. You activate it by turning a knob, and there are 4 modes: up, down, and random, which usually is my favorite, but unfortunately the arpeggiator in the JT Mini doesn't have a way to set the range of the arpeggiator. And setting an arpeggiator to 2-octave range playing randomly is a very inspiring way to create interesting melodies from your chords. For me, that is a limitation that makes the arpeggiator less useful. Another problem is that since the arpeggiator is activated by the same knob as you turn on the unison with, you can't use unison and the arpeggiator at the same time. You have to choose between the two. A bit of a design flaw there. The one unique feature the JT Mini has that the original Jupiter didn't is a built-in sequencer. While fairly limited with only 16 steps, it's a fun addition that can be used to create small phrases and IDs. This is how you record. Hold Function and press M2 on the keyboard to clean out anything old, press Rec and start playing. As you can hear, it even has a metronome, but you can turn it off if you want to. Everything you record will automatically be quantized to whatever note position it sees fit, which sometimes can be an issue to get right, but you can always slow down the sequence to make sure your notes land exactly where you want them. The sequencer is polyphonic, so you can record chords if you want to. A fun little thing you can do is to record random notes with different transposition and see what you come up with. It's not a very exact sequencer, but I wasn't bothered by that at all. I felt it's more like an etch-a-sketch ID pad, where you play around and see what you can come up with. That is especially true when using the Motion sequencer, which lets you record movements of the knobs and sliders. Not all knobs though. For example, you can't automate the resonance, but you can record cutoff, LFO, and even the shape of the envelope. As with the sequencer, all input you record will be quantized to the step. But you can turn on interpolation to make transitions smooth rather than jumping around. While imprecise, it's fun and sometimes you come up with really cool ideas. Okay, let's summarize this thing. Let's begin with the positives. Most importantly, the JT Mini sounds great. The oscillators have lots of weight to them and sounds great. Putting it in unison mode takes the sound to a new level and you just feel, yes, yes, more of this, please. The filter is also excellent and I have nothing bad to say about the envelopes. The main core elements of the JT Mini gets 2 thumbs up from me. Moving on to the negatives. I personally found that the coolest things on the Jupiter 8 wasn't replicated in the JT Mini. Since there is only one oscillator section, you can't get cross-modulation, oscillator sync or even noise. I can live without a dedicated filter envelope, and while a separate high-pass filter is nice to have, that wasn't a deal breaker for me in any way. The Arpeggiator is lacking in terms of range and not being able to play in unison. And lastly, the fact that the JT Mini is paraphonic limits you in what you can do with it. My personal way of dealing with its shortcoming was not to see the JT Mini as a multi-voice synth at all, but rather to see it as a monophonic synth with unison, but being capable of getting into a simple paraphonic mode if you want to. As a bonus, the JT Mini is really not a Jupiter. Too many of the things that define the Jupiter series, such as cross-modulation, sync and high-pass filter, aren't there. But looking at the JT Mini as a whole, I don't think it matters that much. I prefer to see it as a powerful mono inspired by the tone of the old Jupiters, and with the option to be set in a paraphonic mode. I really like it. It's the best of the mini synths Behringer have made so far. If you hang on for a little longer, I'll show you what can be done using the JT Mini when using it as food for your soft synths, with some presets you can download from my web for free. Here are my personal top 5 features of the JT Mini as a sound designer. Unison mode, the sequencer plus motion, it's easy to use, great core sound, 3 voices, although paraphonic.